Hello everyone, welcome back to another Telegram exclusive for the Discourse Education. Yeah, I just realized I always forget to introduce myself. So, hi everyone, I'm Mr. Chang of the Discourse Education. I'm the English, H2 History, and General Paper teacher at this particular tuition center. And yeah, today we are going to be covering some stuff over here. So today's Telegram exclusive is really for secondary school students. Yeah, sorry, just had to close the door to our office, because of the background noise and all that. So yeah, as I said, today's Telegram exclusive is really for the secondary school students. And what we're going to talk about today is really how you can elevate your narrative writing, right? Specifically in terms of the descriptions that you would be using in your narratives. Yeah, well, of course, it doesn't just necessarily have to be for your narratives itself. So that means we are talking about things like your, mixed genres essays or, telling a story, so on and so forth. This can also be used in your descriptive writing essays as well. And what we're going to focus on today is really, three simple steps that you can use to elevate your writing and to write very, very vivid descriptions to such a point whereby, the readers would read what you're writing and then immediately, imagine in their mind's eye what's happening. So, yeah, we are going to talk about that today. And so, yeah, so here it is, all right, how to elevate your narrative writing descriptions with three simple steps. And yeah, there's a mistake here in the slides, right? This is really not for general paper, so ignore that, okay? Right, here we go. So, three simple steps. Step 1, use advanced verbs for commonly used action words, i.e. commonly used verbs, right? What that means is that, if let's say you're not ready to really take your writing to the next level in terms of, varying your sentence structures or to really use more advanced techniques of description, all right? So that means, let's say if you're at a level whereby, yes, you know how to make use of the story mountain, okay, if you're not sure about that, do go onto our website's blog to read more about that. And you can write a decent story, but your language marks, if let's say you can write a decent story, but your language marks typically hover around, I don't know, 11 or 12, right? Then this is definitely for you, okay? So what this means is that you can maintain your sentence structures. Just keep doing whatever you're doing first, all right? Because, to improve first, we gotta ensure that our base is strong, okay? And just simply changed your most commonly used verbs in your sentences. So what do I mean by that? So let's look at a simple example here, all right? Let's say you're writing a scene whereby the main character, or perhaps not the main character, because typically when you write narratives for O levels, you have to write in first person perspective, okay? So let's say you are describing a scene whereby the protagonist's friend or acquaintance or whatever is being, accosted by another person, or to put it in simpler terms, right? Another person is angry at this other person, and then as you can see here, they are heading towards that other person in a very angry sort of manner. So typically what you can do is this, right? Use a little bit of dialogue and some basic descriptions to paint the scene. So Tom shouted. Peter turned around and saw Tom walking towards him. When he saw this, he immediately realized he was in trouble. Ooh, right? So something bad is gonna go down. Now, if you write it in this way, there's nothing wrong with it. It's quite decent, all right, in terms of the descriptions. But if you want to take it to another level, what you can do is you can identify all these commonly used verbs, okay? and replace them with something a little bit more complex. So the idea is that if you use the verb shout, right? Shout, it just typically means somebody, talking in a really, really loud voice, right? But there are also different ways of shouting, and it has to do more with the situation in itself. So, for instance, in this case, what is Tom feeling, right? Is he feeling angry? Is he feeling scared? Is he feeling whatever, right? Fearful, so on and so forth. And because of that, that's why in such a situation, a person may shout in different ways. Okay, and it also has to do with the pitch of the shout itself, i.e., is it high pitched, low pitched, whatever, right? And then, of course, all these other things as well. Turn around and saw. And walking, there are also many different ways of walking. So that in itself is also dependent on the emotions that the character is facing at the point of time, so on and so forth. So how we can elevate this here is with simple words like these, or rather more advanced vocabulary, but this is a simple way of doing it. Peter, Tom bellowed, right? So instead of using the word shouted, use the word bellowed. Why? Because bellowed is, yes, it is also a form of shouting, but it's a very guttural, low frequency kind of shout, typically done when somebody is extremely angry. So, for instance, like, Peter, right? I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. And that kind of sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger as well, but you get what I mean, right? So, Peter, right? If you just write shouted, that's not wrong, but we can make it more interesting. So, Tom bellowed, and then Peter turned around. Instead of writing turned around, right? Whipped around. Because if we switch it with this word, then you can imagine, the speed of Peter turning around being, much quicker, basically. And beheld. So he saw something. So when we say beholding something, that means we are looking at something in full. All right. So, you learn from your bio lessons the fight or flight response. The reason why our irises, expand when we have adrenaline coursing through our veins is because we need to take in as much light as possible. And the reason for that is because humans need to see everything that is in front of them, right? So that they can process whatever information that's right in front of them, such that they can make whatever decisions they need to. So in this case, beheld, right? That suggests that the character was looking at the picture in full, and then beheld Tom stomping towards him. So instead of saying walking, you can use stomping, right? So taking very, very heavy steps and, just basically stomping towards the main character. So this is the first method and first example. We have a second example here, all right? So as you can see in this picture, I mean, of course, this picture is slightly exaggerated, but you can imagine this guy just stomping towards, imagine this is Tom, right? And Tom is stomping towards Peter, right? Ignore the camera there, okay? So another example to really help you understand, Jane picked up a pillow from her bed and hugged it tightly. She jumped up and down, screaming in joy. She had gotten straight A's for her exam. So, again, these are some very simple verbs, right? Picked up a pillow. So imagine, if let's say I'm picking up something over here, right? Yeah. Okay. And of course, hugged it tightly, jumping up and down, screaming in joy, gotten straight A's. That's all fine. However, this is how we can elevate your writing. Snatched. So you can imagine if a person is really in that state of happiness, right? Where she's just so happy, okay, ecstatic, so on and so forth. Typically, for human beings in general, our movements would be much sharper and much quicker because we are feeling this, very heavy sense of happiness. So instead of saying picked up, because picked up can also mean picking it up very slowly, right? Instead, use the word snatched. So, yeah, snatching something, okay? And embraced it tightly, all right? And instead of saying, jumped or bounced up and down, gambled to about to and fro. So if you are wondering what gambling means, it just means, sort of like jumping about, but in a very excited manner, okay? Squealing with joy. So instead of saying screaming, right? Because while both words, screaming and squealing, they both suggest a very high-pitched sort of screaming. Screaming can also be used in contexts of, let's say, fear. So if a person is scared of something, then they might use, if you use the word scream, that can work as well. But instead, use the word squealing. So you can imagine, okay, I'm not gonna try and mimic the voice here, but you can imagine like a girl just, squealing in happiness, okay? And instead of saying she had napped straight A's for her exam. So why would I use the word napped, all right? Ultimately, it depends on you. What sort of choices you want to make, okay? Because whenever we write narratives, the word choices that we make can affect our stories, very, very heavily. In this case, the reason why I use the word napped is because the word napped means to steal something. That's its root meaning. So, in other words, right, the implicit meaning or the subtext, that means the hidden meaning that I'm trying to convey in this particular piece of writing, with just the very simple use of this particular word choice, I am framing the exams themselves, right, as a sort of enemy towards the main character, and in this case, Jane. Okay? And so when I write it as she had napped straight A's, that means Jane stole something to her own benefit, right? Because she views the exams as her enemy. So that is a very, very subtle piece of writing as well to characterize Jane in this particular case. But another simple reason also is that, instead of saying I got something, she got something, he got something, use something else, right? So napped straight A's. And that is the first way of how, you can elevate your writing by just simply replacing, certain verbs, commonly used verbs, with more advanced versions. So the second method really is to describe actions, or in the case of setting, right, describe the setting or scenery with great detail. Okay, of course there are ways, or more methods to really break this down further, but we're not going to cover that today. Essentially, what we are talking about here is that if you want to paint a scene, right, or if you want to describe a character's actions such that you can achieve show don't tell, instead of just telling the reader what is going on, you can describe their actions with great detail. That means, right, imagine if a character is standing straight, okay, and maybe doing a particular pose, let's say hands on hips. What emotion does that convey? Okay, typically it can convey either a sense of triumph, that means maybe let's say they just won a competition or something like that, or it can convey anger as well, right? So how do we know which is which? We describe that the character is holding their hands on their hips, okay, holding their hands on their hips, putting their hands on their hips, okay, but then from there you can go on to describe the facial expressions, because if we are feeling a sense of triumph, typically how will we look like? We'll feel very proud of ourselves, which can translate to a smile. So I don't know, something like that, right? Like just some silly stuff. Or certainly, if you're trying to describe anger, then what will you typically see on a person's face? Furrowed brows, very angry, all that. So That's the second method here. Describe the little things in the scenery or in the character's actions. Okay? So how would that look like? For instance, when Mary walked into the gate, a large house hove into view. Hove into view just simply means like imagine you're walking and then something appears before you. Okay? It was a very old house. Now, this is telling the reader that the house is very old, certainly. And this is a technique that I teach my students as well to help them achieve show, don't tell. Instead of just telling us that, hey, it was a very old house, describe it in detail. Very, very great detail. Then that's how you achieve, more vivid description. So instead of saying it was an old house, say its walls were stained with streaks and blotches of gray and brown. So why would we describe it in this way? Because this can mean rust, right? For instance, gray because of dust, perhaps many, many years of dust, basically covering the walls, right? Or brown, it can just refer to, let's say, moss in a way. Then its roof tiles, once a bright red, were now bleached after years of exposure to the sun. So typically when we have things with color dyes on them, if you put it under the sun for many years, it will lose its color. That's just the way it is. So that's how you can describe how long this house has been in existence. And then its windows were coated in a thick layer of grime. So a lot of dirty shit. Okay. A gnarled and ancient tree, tall and strong, towered over the roof. So we know that trees take a long time to grow, right? If you are describing a tree as being very tall, okay, then that's how we know that that house has been around for a very long time. And of course, to further add more, I guess, a weight to the description here, we made use of adjectives like this: gnarled, ancient. And this is how it may look like, for instance. Okay? Like, let's say you have a picture of an old house and you can see the roof tiles here just being bleached white, or it could be whitewashed, who knows. And then you have a tall tree over here, and then the windows are just horrible, horrible, with a lot of dust and all that. Okay? This is one example, all right? Moving on to a second example. So typically, for you guys, you're always write stories based in the classroom, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I'm pretty sure your teachers would have told you one of the easiest way to write, descriptive or narrative essays is really to base it on your own real life experiences. So over here, right, I'm pretty sure y'all would have experienced this before. I myself have done it to my students. I would burst into the classroom and then I would stare at them because they are being very noisy. Okay, so Mr. Seed burst into the classroom. His face was fierce as he stared around the classroom. We immediately became quiet. Okay, so all these is, this is great, all right, on its own. It can work, but how do we take it to the next level? So this is how we can do it. Oops. Mr. Seed burst into the classroom. His brows were furrowed and his lips were firmly set. So I don't know, I'm not an actor, obviously, right? But something like this. His eyes widened as he glared around. So something like this, right? A hush fell over the entire class, while Joel, who was gyrating comically — gyrating just means dancing in a very weird way — comically in front of the class for our entertainment, scampered back to his seat. Now, so just now I talked about, replacing certain word choices with more advanced levels of vocabulary. Instead of saying he ran back to his seat, say scampered, right? Because in this particular case, Joel was facing a situation whereby, he's in a state of panic because he was dancing in a silly way in front of the class, and then suddenly he sees Mr. Seed come in. So he'll be like, oh crap, okay, gotta get back to my seat quickly. So you can see him just, you can imagine him just, bounding back and scampering back into his seat, right? Because if we just use the word running, then it can mean that he's doing it in a very calm way. Well, not exactly calm, but more of that he's doing it in a very organized way. But in this particular case, he was doing it in a chaotic way because, well, he's panicking, right? So, Mr. Seed, now placing his hands on his hips while standing up straight, continued glaring. The dead silence continued for the next few seconds, although it felt like an eternity. So, again, this is how you can make your descriptions more vivid by simply just describing the little details. Okay, we know that he's angry because he has his hands on his hips and he's glaring at everybody. All right, so yeah, this is the second way that you can do it. Quite straightforward. Although, of course, if you want to be able to write all these kinds of descriptions, what you need to do really is, well, what I'm about to say. You need to read more, because the more you read, right, and the best writers out there, or I shouldn't say the best writers. Actually, yeah, I would say the best writers. The best writers out there, what they can do is they can paint a scene, all right, and get audiences to imagine what is happening. Okay, that's one of the main joys of reading as well. You can imagine what's going on, right, through the very, very simple kinds of descriptions, that the author is using. And in this particular case, because we are describing it in such a detailed manner, so it becomes easier for the reader to imagine what's happening. So if we scroll down here, yeah, it's something like this, right? Furrowed brows, hands on hips, and then, okay, in this particular case, this old man is not really standing up straight, but imagine him standing up straight and he's glaring, right, at everybody. So that's how you can convey that this particular character, Mr. Seed, was being very angry in the story. Okay, so that's the second way. All right, now the third way really is to make use of literary devices. So I presume your teachers will have gone through these with you. If you are Sec 1 or 2 student watching this, you would learn more of it in time. For the Sec 3s and Sec 4s, you all should know these already. So we are talking about things like metaphors, similes, personification, what else? What else are there? Oh god, what else are there? Idioms, so on and so forth. All right. So the reason why we make use of, or rather the reason why we want to make use of literary devices is really as simple as this. Human beings, okay, we are creatures that are born with the ability to imagine. That's how we get all these great stories, okay, through, well, the entire mankind's history, right? Even as we think about, great literary works like The Great Gatsby or modern classics, so on and so forth. George Orwell, Franz Kafka, all those, right? Okay, they're not exactly modern classics, but you get what I mean. Okay, and we can decipher on our own what these literary devices mean when we use it in the proper context. So, in this particular case, for instance, if let's say you want to describe once again the scenery over here, right? It was raining heavily and the skies were gray. You can already imagine it happening. Oh yeah, the skies are gray, right? And it's raining heavily. But how do we make it more vivid? How do we beautify the scene as a whole? You can make use of certain literary techniques like this. It was raining heavily, and then I saw a gray sheen. A sheen is like, a shimmering reflection of something. Far, far ahead, like curtains draped over windows looking out over the horizon. This is a simile, of course. How do we know? Because of this particular word over here. All right. So like curtains draped over windows looking out over the horizon. And this is the scene that we can imagine, right? Let's say you're on the road and then you see this gray curtain out over the horizon, draped over like that in this particular way. That's how you can use literary devices in this particular case, right? Draw a comparison between the scene out there that you're imagining out there and compare it with something else. Okay? So again, I saw a gray sheen far ahead and then curtains draped over windows looking out over the horizon. Then it becomes very, very vivid because it evokes imagination in the readers. So a second example, she tripped and okay, just a little bit of a warning here, all right? If you are squeamish, that means you are afraid of all these kinds of descriptions of blood and all that or injuries, please I don't know, go and skip ahead, all right? And yeah. Don't worry, we're not gonna show a picture of a bleeding wound. Okay, that would be too much. So warning, all right? Skip ahead if you are squeamish. So she tripped and fell on her knee on the concrete. She was wounded and her knee began to bleed. As far as descriptive writing goes, this is still fine, all right? Of course, certainly it wouldn't net you the most marks for, content, but for language as well. So if you want to elevate it, this is what you can do. Well, just an example. She tripped and fell on her knee. The harsh concrete bit into her knee, drawing flesh. Personification, because obviously concrete can't bite. If it can bite, we are all in deep trouble, right? But the reason why I want to use this particular personification is to point out that the concrete was, or at least had some sharp edges, and then that would lead to whoever this girl is, right? As she falls down, her knee would come into contact and then you'll scrape off some skin over there, okay? And then a red, there's a missing word here, apologies. A red patch sprung up on her knees and a waterfall of blood ran down her knees. Okay, sorry, this should be shins. Or shin, yeah. So in this particular case, I made use of two, or rather one metaphor. Okay, in this case, a waterfall of blood. So you can imagine what, when she fell down there afterwards, her knee is scraped there and then immediately it starts bleeding profusely. This is how you can use, all these literary techniques to elevate your writing in this way. Okay, so end of the day, what are the steps here? All right, number one, replace commonly used verbs with advanced ones. Number two, describe the little actions or things in detail. Number three, use literary devices to evoke imagination. And that's how you get elevated descriptions. Okay? So, that will be the end of this video. Alright, I hope this was useful. If it was, please share it with your friends. Or, alternatively, if you are seeking for more, you are seeking more help, alright? And you would like to elevate your narrative writing or comprehension or visual text or whatever, okay, do consider signing up for a free trial with us, all right? And our details are here. You can contact us or get more information from our website. And yeah, if you have a question for us, certainly submit a question here, okay, and we will try and get back to you as soon as possible. But typically when we get questions through this particular link, we would do a questions video and upload it onto YouTube. So yeah, all right, and yeah, that'll be the end of it for this particular Telegram exclusive. And I will see you guys next time.